with my background, I did finally get on with the National Elk Refuge. So that was really a nice thing to do as a biologist. And I was in management and I oversaw most of the public use program and the education, interpretation, outreach type of things, kind of like what Jane does. And over that time, I got to do so many things with the refuge, introduce basically an education program that we'd never had before, interpretation, outreach, doing more with the media and with partners. I ran the sleigh ride operation. My goal at the beginning was to develop a visitor center, which we never were able to get our own visitor center. We ended up acquiring that building that was a state highway information center, and that's our visitor center now. And then we partnered here. We looked at sites all over this area for a visitor center. In fact, we looked at this site, which was an original, it was a campground, an Indian traders, a KOA. It had a little trading post, and it was really tacky. I mean, it was really bad.
Swimming pool?
Yeah, there was a swimming pool. Yeah, campsites all on these terraces up here. We were so happy to see the museum acquire this land. The refuge actually owns 240 acres above here that are parcels that are part of the refuge lands. But so we wanted to see this whole hillside protected, but it was really neat to see that the museum bought this and did this. And then we still hadn't had a visitor center, even though, I mean, we tried all the way back in the 70s. And so many managers at that time were just interested in keeping that land for the elk and not having it be public use. In fact, most of the managers in the Fish and Wildlife, we were U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service National Elk Refuge. That's who I worked for 20 years ago. And I worked for over 26 years for them. And a total career of 34 years with the federal government. But it's interesting how they didn't want to turn lands into any kind of public use. They wanted to keep people off of refuges. It was for wildlife. And so when I came in, I had worked for the Park Service, and you know how Park Service was really pro people. Get everybody in, let them enjoy, appreciate, understand, protect the parks. But finally, Fish and Wildlife Service realized that was something that was important to woo the people, and maybe we'll get some money, get some support, and get some protection for these areas. And so that's what we were doing back in the 70s. And finally it came to the Elk Refuge. We had never even taken people out on a sleigh ride that was an interpretive thing. Before that, we started sleigh rides on the refuge back in the 60s. And they were just because a few people, we used to feed by horse-drawn sleighs, and a few people would ride along on the sleighs and throw out the hay. And they said, hey, it might be good to run. And so the Jackson Hole JCs started running the sleigh rides, and any of the funds they made from proceeds went to the 4th of July fireworks display for the town of Jackson. As when I got there, I said, well, we're missing a great opportunity. We could have a public opportunity. We put a little cabin right over there where those sheds are. It was our first visitor center. We had a cooperating association with Grand Teton Natural History, a couple of books, sales racks, and we started hiring some interpreters to go out on the rides. And finally, the franchise fee from the sleigh ride came back to the refuge, and we could do a few things with that education-wise. First time we started to think outside the box a little bit. And so that grew from there. And then we moved over to the museum for a while, and that was great. And then they moved back down to town. But the refuge never did get to develop its own visitor center. It was interesting. And they're still trying to do that. Person there now has even got some campaign going. I think your program looks wonderful, and I won't say anything. But it's so great that we can do things for education, wildlife, and conservation. I mean, all of us working together for that.
Yeah, but you have somebody who's really driven to renovate and upgrade your stuff over there.
Yeah.
With digital and a lot of
Well,
stuff.
hopefully, but they've got it there again, a campaign to try to raise funds. And that's one we never were able to quite. We looked at sites. We had looked even at this site before the museum was here, but there was no way we were going to purchase it. When I was hired back in the 70s, they actually had $3 million through some Land and Water Conservation Fund, but they turned it back because the manager said, we don't want to encroach on the refuge. So they started looking at sites. We looked at the fish hatchery area, that hill above the fish hatchery. So we were always involved with something to have our own visitor center. but we always ended up partnering. Even when we took over that visitor center, there was a Wyoming Travel Information Center, and it was run by the Chamber of Commerce. And it was on Fish and Wildlife on refuge lands, but we didn't own it. And so basically through the sale, once we moved in there, we had a partnership with, we were one of the unique conservation partnerships. Chamber of Commerce, Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife, Game and Fish, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, even the Park Service. There were like 6 or 7 of us, I think, in there at the time, all running that visitor center, cooperating with each other, all sharing and all contributing something to that. But we couldn't afford it on our own. But eventually through the sale, through Grand Teton Natural History, the books sales in that center, we were able to buy that building from the Wyoming, or from the state of Wyoming, for $250,000 is what they eventually did. And then once our partnership with museums dissolved, we went down there with the sleigh rides, and I had retired by that time, so I wasn't involved anymore. I frankly loved that operation we had with the museum with Jane, and it was great. I just think we were bringing something like 20,000 people to the museum a winter that were going on the sleigh rides, but I think most of the people would go on, wanted to see the elk and the rides, maybe didn't go through the galleries. And so I think the museum felt they were not getting quite their full benefit from that. And so that went away, but that was great. That was
How does that building work out for you?
It worked out really well because we were able to, because we were primarily the ones that got to do the interpretation exhibits. We built the exhibits. We did that bronze, the running elk herd through there. We had that commission through Denver, I remember. We had Greg McCurran do the artwork, that 11-piece artwork that's on the wall at ramp. Because if you haven't seen that, you got to see, that was a friend of Greg McCurran. And I asked him if he would do that for us. And he did it really cheap. I mean, he's gone now, bless his heart, but he was a great guy. And he did that artwork. Have you seen that, everybody? Yeah, that's amazing. And then we did a lot of other things. And now they still want to maybe tear down. That was the old grass roof building. And they wanted to tear it down and build something new. So I don't know how that'll go, but it's still a partnership. There aren't as many partners now, but they do run the sleigh rides out there. It's worked out really well. Sleigh rides have grown since, I remember back in the old days when we had a little cabin over there, the little visitor center, there were maybe 6,000 or 10,000 people. When we were over here, it was 20,000. I think we were running like 30,000 people on those sleigh rides these days to see the elk, which is totally amazing. Well, some of the jobs I got to do over the time I was at the refuge, you know, like I was in charge of the public use program and trying to get new signage, get visitor information, education. We hired interpreters for the first time ever. I was in charge of the hunting program, which is a very integral part of keeping the numbers of elk commensurate with the winter range, keeping those numbers down so that we don't have to feed as many elk. We can keep them spread out. I was in charge of the sleigh rides, in charge of the antler program with the Boy Scouts, which was a big one. The Boy Scouts started picking up antlers in 1957. The first collections went to build the town square arches. And the first auction that they did in May was in 1968. And I was here after that, but I got to run that antler auction in the program with the Boy Scouts for a little 27 years or something. It was really fun. It was, so the elk are shedding their antlers right now on the refuge. They started in late February, throughout March, and maybe into April, but a lot of the big bulls will drop theirs first. And the Boy Scouts will come out starting like maybe by the end of this month as the snow lessens and as the elk are starting to move out. We don't want to disturb the elk any, but we'll get the kids coming out in the late afternoon some of those days. And then there was a big pickup day we would have in April, where one big Saturday we would just have hundreds of kids from all the troops come out, go scour the hills on the north end. I think they still do it the same way. Like I said, I haven't worked there for 20 years and there's a whole new program, but it's the way we used to do it. There was one year we even had a guy, Louis Llama, who used to have llamas for rent for people to go hiking with. And he loaned them to the Boy Scouts, and they took the llamas out there and loaded the antlers onto the llamas and bring them back. But we'd collect thousands of pounds. I mean, we'd have collections of somewhere 8,000 to 10,000 pounds of antlers. This last year, have you been to the auction You should check that out. It's the third Saturday in May. Still, it's a historical thing down on the town square. And over the years, it's grown to where private vendors used to bring their wares and park on the drugstore side of this town square. And the town would get after them because they didn't get a business permit to sell all the skulls and antlers and various things. And they wanted to keep track of it. So we said, why don't we do a thing all together and so they call it Elk Fest. We sort of invented that. And so now they call it Elk Fest, and they have this big celebration the week before Old West Days. And so then they actually, all these people that bring their private stuff, they have to get a town permit to sell it. The Boy Scouts still do the auction on that same morning. And this last year, they sold around 8,000 pounds for 240,000. I don't know. It was amazing. I think the biggest sale we had back when I was doing was about 140,000, and they sold for about $8 a pound. They're going for way over that now. I think they're doing it for different things. In those days, they were doing for antlers, chandeliers, knife handles, the Asian market for the aphrodisiacs, as they say. Particularly velvet antlers were good for that, but they would grind up. We had Asians come and buy thousands of pounds of antlers. One year, a knife handle buyer from Germany bought the whole lot. And so it was fascinating, but we would work with the scouts. They'd pick them up, they'd bundle them, weigh them, tag them, and have them all ready to go. They would even try to match up antlers that would be an equal set, match set. And it's like a mirror image of the burrs, the burl, the part that attaches to the skull. So they would be matched. And if you get a matched big set, they would sell for much more. So they would do that. They'd sort them out and they'd have them all ready to go. And they line them up in the town square and they sell these. And so the Boy Scouts would typically get a percentage from that. Originally, the first auction they did back in the 60s, they got the whole amount of money. And they got so greedy that they were fighting among themselves in their district as to how to spend that money, what to do with it. And so we said, hey, it makes sense that those elk are dropping antlers, you're making money off of them, and it's a renewable resource. We're not hurting the elk, we're picking them up, we're getting them off the range, and we're preventing poachers from going out there and getting them. But why don't you return part of the profit back to the refuge? And therefore, we can help feed the elk with some of that money. And that's what we did. We had a pool of money that we could spend to get our elk feed. And so the Boy Scouts back then, I think we started with about a 10-12% franchise fee for it. And then it's grown over the years. I found out just last year, it's up to 25% now. They give the Boy Scouts back, but that's not 100%. So 75 is going back to buy feed for the elk to help us supplement a feeding program. Otherwise, our tax-paying money would have to buy that feed. The Wyoming Game and Fish Department, the state agency, also participates and provides a good portion of that feed for the elk. And so, yes.
Has the elk herd changed over the years at all?
It has, and actually that's one of the big management concerns for the elk is, not only numbers of elk, but feeding, diseases, all that, as far as how many elk are out there, the carrying capacity, how much that range can support. Originally, there were years when I was working there where we had as many as 13,000 elk on the refuge even. Right now, the Jackson elk herd is around 9,000 elk. And the state of Wyoming has 22 state feed grounds, ranging from up the Gros Ventre to like Fall Creek, Pinedale, Bondurant, except 22. We have the biggest area, the Elk Refuge, where we have the most elk. This winter, the other day, there was a lot of elk. There was like 3,000 elk out there. I can look at elk. I worked there so many years, I can just look and tell you how many elk are in a bunch. There's a few hundred there, but there was a lot the other day. On feed this year, we've had 7,500 elk. And so the goal right now is to have an average of about 7,500, not 10,000 or not 11,000. And it's really important because the whole goal, and we just started feeding them. The reason I know this is I talked to the one guy I still have contact with over there that I worked with is Eric Cole, who's a biologist for the refuge. And he's been there now almost as long as I was. He's been 24, 25 years. And so I talked to him and he said they have 7,500 elk on the refuge. They started feeding in February on about the 18th, and they're gonna end about next week. So this year it's less than a month, or about a month, which is really good. The average amount of feeding is like 60 days or so. I mean, a lot of years are tougher winters and they have to feed earlier, feed longer. And it's just because the elk, if it's a tougher winter, more snow, frozen conditions, the elk can't get down through that to get to the forage underneath. So then they need the supplemental feed program, or they'll have a higher die-off mortality.
Why did the numbers go from 13,000 to 7,500?
Well, because of concerns with an elk management plan for diseases.
So that was managed?
Yeah, it was
Wasn't
managed.
Natural.
No, that wasn't natural. No, we were managing, and we had a lot of hunting going on. And that was another one of my jobs, to manage the hunting program. We used to have drawings out at the rodeo grounds in town where people would come and put in a tumbler, and pull out, and we'd give them permits for 3 periods during the week to hunt on the north end of the refuge, about 15,000 acres of hunt area. Grand Teton National Park had a hunt area as well. They deputized people as deputy park rangers, but they gave them a hunting permit. And so it wasn't called a hunt. That's the only national park in the United States of that status, national park, that has a hunt in it. But that we were doing our part, they were doing their part to help reduce numbers of elk, make the numbers of elk commensurate with the winter rains, the amount of forage, and the disease concerns were getting to be more and more prevalent. So we always try to get the numbers down, but of course with Wyoming Game and Fish, that's the state agency. They issue hunting permits, and it's very important that they issue a lot of hunting and they make their revenues that way, and people like to hunt. We've dealt with a lot of hunters that are local people. They fill their freezers every year. Families come out. I mean, we used to have some, people that I knew from the valley. Thuring Law used to hunt with her family. Turners would hunt out here. There's lots of people that I knew, and they would fill their freezers. They would to get the elk. And so we were able to cull that herd down. There was years where we took as many as 600 or 700 elk just on the refuge. This last year, he said they just took 150.
What was the impact of wolves?
Well, that was 1995, and that was another one of my jobs. I was involved with wolf reintroduction as far as public hearings. I would go travel to different areas where they were having hearings about the reintroduction of wolves. That's had an impact, definitely. Wolves do take elk, and that's their food, and there are the wolf packs around. You've probably seen them on the right here from the refuge. It's great. One day before I retired, even wolf pack came off the butte there and took an elk right in front of the sleigh ride. The people were like, and it just happened to be that there was a group of people that were conservationists from like California, and then some people from like Du Bois, and they were anti-wolf, and they got into a whole little discussion, kind of a heated discussion. Right there, as our interpreter was trying to explain what's going on with that wolf, they killed the elk and then went back and left it. And so they were like, see, they just killed for the fun of it, It's like, well, not really. And then definitely they came back and they did clean that up. And as well as coyotes, eagles, ravens, magpies, everything enjoyed that. But yeah, the wolf has definitely had an impact on the numbers of elk as well.
Where do you find your interpreters? The guys that drive the sleigh.
So that's a contract. That's a private contract. And that used to be originally back in the 60s and 70s run by, well, it was, I forget the first guy, I wasn't here, but then it was Brad and Joanne Luton that ran it. And then it was Jim Thomas in the years where we were here together doing that. And now it's Warburton's. And so it's a private contractor, and they're the ones that also run that wagon ride up Cache Creek in the summer. Jim Thomas ran that, and I think he turned it over to these other folks. And they do a wagon ride with a dinner, chuck wagon dinner. But they have the horses, the sleighs, and they also have wagons. When their snow conditions are right, they can still run. And they run when the elk are there. We are still feeding, and it's opportunistic that one of our feed areas, we feed in about 4 locations out on the refuge. Down south by the Miller House, right here, right up by Flat Creek, and then farther up in one little hollow up there. And so they try to feed in different locations to spread the elk. So when the elk aren't on feed, they're utilizing more of the natural forage and grasses and getting down to it. But yeah.
Why do you have to
Good
feed
question.
them?
What's that?
Why do you have to feed them? I thought naturally they come down, eat the
I
grass.
know, they do, and we produce, that's one of the things the biologists do in the summer is try to grow as much grass as they possibly can through. It used to be flood irrigation, canvas dams and little flood ditches. And now they've gotten more pipe and sprinkler systems going, which money from the Boy Scout antler, over $1 million has contributed to that. And different things, but they try to produce as much forage, and it's about 700 pounds per acre. It's a lot of forage out there. If you look in the summer and you see how green the refuge is, there's a lot of grass. And so when the elk first come in, we try to keep the elk off as long as possible. The elk aren't doing better, and the bison particularly. Years ago, we used to have as many as 1,000 bison. They're down now to about 500 and only about 300 on feed. Try to keep them to the north, try to keep them up at Elk Ranch in the park. But the number of a bison eats about 3 times what an elk does. And so you have all these mouths chomping on all that grass. And as that diminishes, we go out there and we see that it's just a lot of feces, and it's a lot of wear and tear and hoof prints, and there's not much forage left. They start to analyze the range and they see it's about time to start feeding. It's a very scientifically controlled thing. We don't just say, oh, looks like they're hungry now, let's start feeding them. It's very monitored so that the carrying capacity of the refuge will meet the needs of those elk, so we have little die-off. And that also when you start feeding, you're putting those animals nose to nose. And you see how close they were over there this morning? Did you see that herd all just bunched? Because they dropped the feed in an S-shaped pattern. They used big Cat Challenger tractors pulling a trailer with little chutes of the pellets. They're alfalfa pellets about that long. It looked like big rabbit food. And they're dispensed in a S-shaped pattern. The elk come in and just go from line to line to line, and then they bunch up. So it's just like when kids come back to school and they pass the colds around. That's exactly, it's a disease spreader. And so between, the pneumonia diseases they have, the scabies, the brucellosis, and now chronic wasting disease, which has not been actually detected on the refuge yet. But these are the things that by not feeding, you're going to do a better job. You want it to be as natural a situation as possible. The elk to fend for themselves during the winter as long as they can, and not feed them, have them spread out. But when you're feeding them, you're enticing diseases, you're spending a lot of money, and it's just not a natural situation. But this whole thing about numbers of elk hunting versus having fewer numbers with more or less disease and spreading out, it's a...
Mark, the security guard, if you wanted me to ask this question, why do you feed them in the F shape?
Well, it helps to spread them out better. And then we're using mechanical equipment. So, we do a long line and then turn and come back about a quarter of a mile. And, just like that. And you go pretty far. So, you have to do it in a certain amount of time or whatever, or it'll all bunch up.
Okay.
So you try to do it fairly quickly in a smaller. You saw that right there was a good example.
He manages the webcam, so he's always wondering, he's like, how do they do it like that? I'm like, I'll ask Jim Griffin today.
No, it's to help spread them out. And they do it in 4 distinct locations all through the refuge, from all the way down there to farther north as you look past Flat Creek up there. There's another, and they have them going simultaneously. So we have different rigs, like this rig's feeding at the same time this one, and that way the elk aren't going to run like, oh, they're getting food and we're not. So it's all very well planned and managed.
So how many years has the feeding been going on?
Oh, ever since, that's how it all started. That's the real history. It started with elk had migrated down through this valley and continued on down through to the Red Desert originally. And then because of the development of Jackson in the late 1800s, and they just blocked off a more migration corridor for the elk. It's a very narrow path, as you can see, down through ranches and roads and people's homes and stuff, and farms started to block that. And so the elk and all this land out here, it was a refuge, was homesteaded. There was, I don't know how many. There was a guy, John Parrott, that junior high teacher that did a whole history study of the refuge. He went and investigated every old home site out here and the names of people who lived out here. And I got to meet some of them. There was one lady, Bertha Chambers Gillette, who she was one of 9 kids that grew up right over there by Flat Creek. And there was a little school right there, Flat Creek Schoolhouse. And she talked about how the elk would come in and her dad was trying to raise hay for a few cattle, and the elk would come in and raid the hay and eat it. And so they would put them up, fence it off, but they'd still get in there. There was an early photographer that came at a request of a biological survey in Washington because of this. The dying elk in Jackson Hole was a real concern. They said there were so many dead elk that were trying to raid ranchers' hay supplies. The elk would die and just lie there rotting, and you could step on elk like cobblestones and walk for a mile without stepping off of an elk. That's how many dead elk were strewn out here.
And that was due to starvation.
Starvation, because they just didn't get enough. The migration, end of the migration funnel was stopped by the town of Jackson, and they didn't have anywhere else to go but to raid for ranchers' hay supplies. So this guy, S.N. Leak, had one of the first Kodak cameras. He took panoramic pictures of these elk starving, just lying everywhere. And it hit the media back east, and everybody, whoa, And so the state of Wyoming was concerned as well as the federal. And this was one of the first refuges established in 1912, right down there by the Miller House. Robert Miller was actually the supervisor of the first forest, the Teton National Forest, back in those days, right before the refuge. And he had a little cabin there, but then he built the Miller House. It was kind of the exclusive house of Jackson Hole back in the late 1800s. I think it was started in 1895, finished in the early 1900s. That was a social gathering place and it was a post office. They had parties and dances. Grace Miller was the first mayor. His wife was the first mayor of the town of Jackson. She had an all-woman town council, part of women's suffrage. They say when the guys were out doing all the work on the road, the women were running the town. And that's the truth. It really was. She's pretty famous, in Jackson.
Well, excuse me, I used to hunt, but I don't quite understand why they let people hunt on refuge, because isn't it kind of like shooting fish in a barrel?
Well, that's what, and listen, I ran the hunt program. That was another part of my job. I had law enforcement. I had that in the Park Service. We went to Flatsea in Georgia, but I had credentialed law enforcement. It was kind of a collateral duty to the main duties. I wore lots of hats, but yeah, I felt like as a hunt patrolman out there, 15,000 acres, and we only allowed 40 permits at a time out there in that 40 acres. They had to walk or horseback out there, or eventually they wanted to ride bikes, mountain bikes. We let that, and then no vehicles were allowed except after 4 o'clock for retrieval purposes only, and the hunt ended after that. But they go retrieve by driving a circle road. But I felt like as a hunt patrolman, I needed to have more of like a referee jacket, stripes instead of just, because there were times when, people would complain about bullets flying and nobody ever got shot. A few hunters injured themselves. So I was out there one day, a guy was dressing his elk and he stabbed himself in the thigh. We threw him in a vehicle, raced. Thank goodness the hospital was right on the end of Broadway Street. And then one day out there in 2 different parking lots, we had parking lots, so we divided the people up, throughout the area. One guy shot through his floorboard loading his rifle. And at the same time, we got a call, a guy shot his foot. So, they were more of a threat to themselves, I think, in some ways than they were. But then we had quabbles. People would say, I shot that up on the north end by the Grove Pond, it ran, and I followed it, and then this other guy shot it down here. And so we'd have to sort it out and be the referee.
It seems pretty chaotic.
But we never had, it's just that we limited the number of hunters and we had a big area, and it wasn't really a shoot a duck in a barrel because the elk were coming through a lot at nighttime and very few in the day. And so people really have to get out there and scour, go up to the Gros Ventre River in the hills, all that land up there, 15,000 acres. And they complained it wasn't as easy as they thought it was going to be. But we did our part along with the park to help bring those numbers down to make it commensurate with the amount of winter range and how many elk are out here eating and using the land and having to be fed.
Isn't it also true that that's where a lot of the kids go learn to hunt?
Yes, and we had a youth hunt program. We were trying to make it a community thing and a family thing, and we did encourage the youth hunt. People had to have hunter safety cards, they had to go through that. They had to go, we did a little, when we used to do the hunt with the rodeo ground, the drawing, that issue the 40 permits per period. We would do a whole educational explanation. I would stand there and tell the hunters, you know, here's the rules on the refuge. You got to do this and this and this and blah, 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 blah. And people appreciate it. And I even had some people come to me, like there was a guy from Rock Springs one day. He came and said, thanks for going over all. He says, and I like you handing out the brochure about the rules and regulations. But he says, and I like you going over because he said, I can't read. And I was like,
Wow.
I read somewhere that the Elk Preserve is 10 times the size of the town of Jackson. Is that accurate?
it's 25,000 acres. So I don't know what the town of Jackson is, but it's big. I mean, if you look, this refuge, and I mean, we're bounded by Forest Service wilderness area to the east. And then the Grovont Road is our boundary with Grand Teton National Park, all the way to Kelly. And then this whole highway down along here, and then the town, the fence just goes along the town and this highway. The Grovont River is not fenced, and the north side of the Grovont River is our boundary with Grand Teton National Park. And then it goes all the way up there to that parcel of land that was recently purchased, that where the pronghorn migrate and so forth. That's the corner of the refuge, the forest, and the park are right there. That's a critical area. So great that they purchased that from the state.
Do you know when they decided to put the fence along the highway here?
Oh, that's a good question. That's been there a long time. And then one of the projects I did was working with Boy Scouts and Eagle Scouts on putting those elk jumps in there. They'd eventually like to put in some underpasses, you know, but those elk jumps are where there's those patches of dirt to go up, and there's an opening in the fence, so elk can go up and jump into the refuge, but then it's like this far of a drop, they won't jump over that to get out. So it's kind of like a fish funnel. They'll go in, they're caught along the highway, and we put about a half a dozen of those along there to aid that. Yeah. So what else? I'm trying to think of some of the other things I got involved with, the antlers. And
I have a question about the Boy Scouts. So when the Boy Scouts go out there and pick up the antlers, do they get to keep? I know they don't keep all the money, but do they keep it for local Boy Scout chapters, or does it?
It goes to the council. It's Idaho Fall. That was one of their problems. They said, I mean, they're one of the richest Boy Scout troops in the country. In fact, they said that they, at one time, they were there was one troop that was richer than they were. Can you figure out what that might have been? Marin County, California, where they had a benefit by the stars. That happened to be the richer Boy Scout troop than ours, but yeah, they argued over it a good bit about their funds, but this troop always got to do anything they wanted to do. They did camping trips.
You mean the local ones?
Yeah, the locals, yeah, they brought much of the money back to them. Yeah.
Why don't the bison migrate down here? Do you prevent them, or?
We have done that, yes. When the bison was much larger one time, and so now we're hunting bison, and that's been a very big program. Over the years, that bison herd, it was originally the Jacksonville Wildlife Park. There were like 9 bison that escaped. They put them back, they escaped again. It was back in the 60s. And they started roaming along with a few bison from Yellowstone and started to form this herd, 100 and then a couple hundred. By the time I retired, it was about 1,000 bison now in the Jackson bison herd. And they were, like I said, they ate 3 times what an elk does. And when you have that many, they were coming down and feeding right out here. And so we started trying to haze them. There was a time when they actually walked down and came right out by the hospital on Broadway Street. And I remember being out there. We had to chase them down Broadway Street and get them back onto the refuge. And then they eventually put a cattle guard in there, but we were using rubber bullets and cracker shells to scare them. But then we started trying to keep them up. And I think with some of the changes in some of the lands in Grand Teton, that elk ranch area has become very popular for the bison in the summer. They tend to stay up there longer in milder winters. But, you know, in the earlier days, they were coming down and almost destroying that riparian area around Flat Creek. They were just rubbing on everything and eating everything. It was just like a destruction zone. So our goal when we started to hunt back, we had a hard time getting a bison hunt going on the refuge back in the, we wanted to do it in the 90s and it was hard to get going because there was so much animosity to hunting the Americans. Well, we had a barrel full of letters and postcards when we were proposing a hunt. That they were like, you can't, all the adjectives, you blah, 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 guys, we're trying to kill the American bison. And all we were doing is a management program, just like with the elk, trying to reduce the number of head down here on this limited winter range between elk and bison, eating everything out, eating us out of house and home. And so the first hunt we did actually, because we couldn't, we had to go and do an environmental assessment and an environmental impact statement on hunting bison on the refuge. We finally got it through. I forget the year we started hunting, it was about 2000 or so. But before that, we would actually have tribes from the Wind River. We realized that the Native Americans can hunt bison without, you know, we don't have to get them through the EIS. And this is a funny story. I have so many stories about this. But so we had our first, we went out there and shot 5 big bulls. We're kind of feisty guys, and asked the Native Americans to come over. These guys came over one morning. We'd shot them out there. It was just a little north of here, and they said, "Oh, great. Are you guys going to dress them out?" And I said, "No, they're yours. We just shot them." And then they're like, "Oh, if we know we had to dress them, we would have brought the squaws." They didn't even have a knife. And so they ran into town and Ace Hardware, everywhere they could go, and got every buck knife, came back out and were trying to do it. And then they were just like having a time with, you know, these bison, huge. And so we took our front end loader and hoisted them up, and then they were able to dress them out. But that was the first ones. And then, you know, they did that for a few years. And then once we got our first hunt in order, we had a number of bison that were radio collared. I had these big radio transmitters on them. Now they use GPS radios. There's about 50 out there, but the bison are collared too. And our first hunt, we had the flaming bison. And what does that mean? Well, one of the first hunters shot one with a radio and hit the radio, and it caught on fire. And the bison's, you know, the large fur they have around their head, caught on fire, and he was running along, burning. And I was like, oh my gosh, so we had to go out there and shoot that bison. But the flaming bison was one of our first hunts. And it was like, oh, what a great way to start. Oh, I mean, I do have some stories. Like before this area became the museum, this was that hillside I said with the campground and stuff. There was one time in the winter where a guy got up here with a paraglider and took off and flew over the refuge. Now the refuge, you notice how the elk are just, have you been on a sleigh ride?
Yeah.
You all done, that's the greatest way to see the elk. They stay put because they're not fearful of something that they feel is not a threat to them. So if you stay on the sleigh and don't step off, the sleighs just go right around and there's no threat to the elk. They're perfect with that. But this paraglider took off and flew over this wintering elk herd, and they just spooked like 3,000 elk and started running right through the sleighs and running to the north. That paraglider, it was just something out of the ordinary, different.
You're not supposed to do that, right?
Yeah, no. In fact, there's no landing. Yeah, there's wildlife laws about aerial. Drones, yeah, no drones. In fact, we had everybody try something. There was a balloon landing one time over here, and they were like, "Oh, well, we just want a space as a escape in case we have a problem." No, not on the road. And then there was a guy that landed a plane right out here and crashed into a ditch. He was a FWI, flying while intoxicated. And we caught him. And then there was a time when the whole herd stampeded and we couldn't figure out what's going on. And one of the bulls had gotten caught in a big black plastic garbage bag. And he was running and they were all running away from him and
The
circling.
poor guy.
They thought he was the elk from hell. And I mean, so you never know what's gonna happen out there. It's like we got involved with so many different situations. I think I'm running over my time. See, I could go
I was
on.
just asked if there's any
One
final
more-
questions. Yeah,
So in the spring, I know they naturally decide it's time to start migrating back
Yes.
up to higher elevations. But do they sometimes haze them to just get them off the refuge
Yeah.
if they wanna linger?
Yeah.
And how, like rubber
Generally, they
bullets?
do, no, on their own, there's a real sense of the time of year, light and condition. And so they start to migrate and they know just when to do that, but we'll definitely encourage them to get off, because as soon as they get off, the less they're
Right.
crowded. And we are concerned about, chronic wasting disease particularly. It hasn't shown up on the refuge, but it has been in the park area with deer and elk, and it's been down near Bondurant. And elk, so, and they test, hunters turn in their heads every year. And they test that for CWD.
That's why.
It's a prion disease, which is it's not a virus, it's not a bacteria, it's very tough. It's, yeah. we
Why do
don't-
they ask hunters to like put some teeth, like save some teeth, and don't they ask them to like pull some teeth?
Well, we've done that, and size your teeth out to age the elk to see how many,
Oh,
we've
to
had.
age the elk.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically, we've had some very old cows. It's a matriarchal herd.
Right.
Cows lead the herd in migration and so forth. They're the head of the herd. But we had a cow that was 28 years old one year, and they take the lower incisor teeth. The upper don't have teeth. It's just a hard palate, but the lower incisor teeth where they bite off the vegetation, they're grazing animals, eating grass mostly. And so they'll cut the incisor tooth in half, look under a dissecting microscope, and count rings, cementum annuli. They lay down annual cement rings. You can tell how old, just like a tree, rings on a tree. But once the animal's just worn their teeth out, they can't eat it anymore. And we've had animals die just from.
Like a horse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of same thing.
Where do all the elk go? Is there,
So, okay, the elk, this is a fantastic, I always call this the winter Serengeti, it's the largest concentration of elk probably in North America. The longest migration of elk except for the caribou in Alaska. So this is really unique in this ecosystem. And these elk will migrate, like some of these elk from the refuge, because of the GPS collars we know, they'll go all the way up to into the arms of Yellowstone Lake. 100 miles.
Vacation. That's amazing.
Yeah, go up to Yellowstone for the summer. Well, they want to get higher elevation where it's cooler, less bothersome insects, and there's good vegetation and cool climate. So when they're got their summer coat of fur, and then a good number of them will go into the wilderness areas of the Bridge of Teton, the Teton Wilderness, and then a number of more animals are going to the park these days and on the west along the river, Snake River. Like there's some major migrations now coming down out of the west side along the Snake and down through the area by the golf and tennis and in those lands. There's been some protected lands there, and they come right across and then go right, north of the refuge across the highway and into the refuge. So it used to be more like, I don't know, probably most of the elk go into Grand Teton, and it sort of changes over the years they do follow the same pathway. Calves where they're born, they'll go back to that same place and have the summer there. So.
And your methods of encouragement to get them to move?
Well, we used to go out. We had horses. We go out and try to kind of wrangle them a little bit, or just drive out and just make them restless. We didn't do anything like the bison where we would actually shoot at them or anything like that. No, we just try to make elk a little restless to encourage them to move, because when they're down here and they're so comfortable and they're just soaking up the sun and they've got food, new grass coming up, it's just too easy, for any of the freeloaders. And so, just make them a little restless and get them encourage them to start moving, nothing too extreme, but yeah.
All right, any other questions?
I
Thank
could
you
go
so
on
much. I
forever.
know, I feel bad, like, I wanna keep going, but we got a lot
No,
of
it's
stuff we
been
gotta go
fun,
over.
and like I said, this museum is a wonderful facility, and And you guys as volunteers, it's a great job doing, helping people with education, appreciation, understanding of art and wildlife. I know I got involved with a lot of fun artists here too over the years. I mean, part of my job was media outlet. I got to deal with filmers and artists and media and TV, and got to meet a lot of celebrities and people. That was part of my job too, to take them out on the refuge. But Tucker Smith, I went out here and he scoped out to do that one art piece that he had, or yeah, I took him out on the refuge. And when I first moved here, do you all know Connie Schwerin? There's that name. So he was a pretty famous artist. I lived up at Moose in a little apartment and in the 70s, and he came to me one day and said, well, after I moved here, I didn't know who he was, you know. And he says, I'm Conrad Schwerin, I'm an artist. He says, you've got a place in your backyard that's just beautiful, the aspens and the Tetons. It was in the fall. He said, can I just spend a few days and do a piece of art there? And I said, go for it. And he set up his easel and he was painting there for a couple afternoons. And finally, yeah, he was done. And I went and looked at it and I said, that is beautiful. And it was fall colors of the aspens and the mountains right there. About that scene you have when you go through the entrance station in the fall. I had that in my backyard in the place I was living in Moose and for the Park Service. And I said, so man, it's beautiful. It was a piece about, you know, good size. And I said, gosh, how much did that cost to buy? And he said, no, my stuff is pretty expensive. He says, it'll be a couple $1,000. I said, oh, that's way more than that. And now that he's gone, and I realized that would have been a good investment. Anyway, thank you, folks.
Feel free to stick around.
Oh, it wasn't so much of a fun thing at the time.
All right, so now I have the hard job of doing the boring part of the meeting, all the updates and things. Hard act to follow, but we'll try our best. It's gonna, hello? There we go. As always, our mission, our vision, our values. I'm required to put these on the PowerPoints. First important thing, Wyoming Sage Society. It took a little while to get this updated because you'll see why in a little bit. We had to do a lot of updates to the plaque. But in 2024, both Lynn and Joyce made it over 500 hours. So we have the plaque back there to take pictures after the meeting, and I have. Oh boy! So make sure I think that
You get a raise.
last minute come up. Yeah, right. Make sure to say congrats whenever you guys have a chance to Lynn and Joyce. So yeah, thank you guys for all your hard work at the museum.
Like, Lynn is sick.
Yeah, she told me last minute, but we'll get you guys together to get a picture with the plaque, so don't worry about it too much. As you guys know, this is one of my big things that I'm working on, which is the evaluation of the 3D PhotoWorks interactives. Many of you have been going to my trainings, which I will say again, thank you so much for doing that. If you are unable to go to those trainings, but you want to help out, they are on the YouTube channel, both the general evaluation and focus group training. And if there's anything you guys have questions about, let me know. But the trainings are complete. We're gonna have 2 practice sessions for the general survey coming up. We have the first on the 24th at 11 a.m. and the other on the 31st. These are both on Mondays and they're already on VicNet. I did the same thing I did for the library shifts where there's about 4 shifts on there. More people can come, of course. I'm just limited to 4. So if you guys can make these, it'll be great. And if you can't, but you want more practice sessions, just let me know. We'll discuss that more. The surveys are going to be conducted from May to June, and the focus group evaluation, our tentative date, the one that I have been sharing with the public, is the 28th. However, we have had 2 special interest groups who might be coming in at different times in April. One is Sage Living. As you guys know, they come and visit us on Mondays in the winter. And so I reached out to them and they're very interested in helping us out. So they may do their own focus group. Teton Adaptive has also reached out to us. Patrice gave me their contact information and they're very excited. I think they're planning on just pushing this focus group date So they might not have a separate one, but I will of course keep everybody updated. But for those of you who are interested in doing the note taking for the focus group, please put this date in your calendar. As soon as I have other dates, I will update you accordingly. Any questions about the evaluation project? Awesome, thank you so much. We have exciting news from the VLC and Steve. New volunteer board, asterisk, details are subject to change as we get more approval. Steve's been traveling a lot, so he hasn't been able to give a lot of feedback, but hopefully after today he will. Oh, there we go. This is basically, Steve brought up that he wanted a way to recognize volunteers on a more frequent basis. So something we worked with the VLC and the education department on is a volunteer of the quarter. Basically, it's kind of like an employee of the month, except we work on quarters, so it'd be quarterly. For example, if we did the award this time, it would be based on January 15th, which was our last quarterly meeting, to today. So it'll be your performance between that time. Volunteers are being nominated by to the education department by fellow volunteers and staff. The final decision on who will be recognized will be made by the education department. So 3 of us will come together before the quarterly to make that decision. The criteria is, I have a larger document I will share with everybody once the details are all solidified. But there are 4 criteria based on our museum values. Those is outstanding performance, consistent service, collaborative spirit, and museum advocacy. If you guys have any questions about those specifically, let me know, but I give a lot of examples in the document so you guys can kind of think of what that will be. The current prize that we're still working on getting approval for, but is the most popular, is a spot at the front of the South Lot and lunch with Steve at Palette. So if you guys have any questions about this process, let us know. I'm hoping to get everything approved and ready by June's quarterly. So start thinking about things like that. Yes.
I think something that's important to think about, and I have an issue because I'm not a real fan of volunteer awards. Because I feel like we're all stars and nobody's any brighter than the other. But I realize there are people out there who like recognition. But then my thought is that what we want?
Yeah, I know
And
for
that's
Steve.
something we all have to think about as we move forward with this.
Yeah, I know this is something Steve specifically wanted to sponsor and bring up. So like he's gonna be sponsoring lunch, he's gonna be coming to lunch, he's gonna work to secure the parking spot. So like this is something he wanted to do like on kind of on behalf of the museum, but also representing like volunteers and everybody. So that's kind of where it was coming from, is Steve wanted to do this. I also like it was a good idea because sometimes there are periods where there's people can volunteer more than others. You know, health concerns always come up. So I just think a quarterly basis is like,
You know, it could be something where we try it out and then we reassess.
exactly, yeah, it's
Is
not
this
a
doing
permanent
what-
thing.
Is this, are people liking this? Is it doing what we want it to do?
Exactly.
I was just gonna say, I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
I'm totally in favor of recognizing the people that are putting in extra effort.
Especially if you want to get more volunteers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a great incentive to bring.
What are you attracting when you do that? Think about it. Like, do you want it's kind of like what kind of butterfly do you want?
But that's up to the training that they go, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that, I mean, it's,
You can't change a person. I get it, and I understand where Steve's coming from. I'm just thinking, there are good things about it, and it's important to let Sage know. But there's also some things that provide challenge. And I kind of like Jane's thought, because you know, when it comes time to vote annually, I've always heard the folks complain they can't get people to vote. You know, for the annual one. I just think it's something that is good and bad, and you know,
It's a new idea, so we're just trying it out. So keep in mind, I'm going to try and have everything ready by the June quarterly. So keep an eye out, think of these things, and of course, I'll send out the official document once I have it.
And I think anytime we do something new, it's really important to assess it.
Exactly, yes. So I'll definitely be looking for feedback as well. Other new thing, as we were talking about earlier, is getting the volunteers into the board. This is something that the VLC brought up, is having somebody be a board liaison that's outside the VLC. I did that. There we go. We're good. Basically, it's a twice a year commitment, probably most likely in the summer and the winter, where you would go speak at the board meetings and give them updates on the volunteer program. They thought it would be best to hear from a volunteer instead of me or Jane or the VLC. So if you are interested in becoming a board liaison, basically you'll work with me, we'll write up an update, and you will go to these board meetings. Most likely in the beginning, you'll present and then you'll leave the board meeting. If you are interested in doing that, please let me know. I, of course, I'm gonna announce it to all the volunteers. This is just the first time we'll announce it. We are also looking for a new member for the volunteer leadership committee because after Bill's passing, it is a much smaller group now. So if you feel like you are up to, it's a once a month commitment on the first Wednesday, 1 p.m. is what our usual time is. If you guys would like to come help and give some opinions and give me some crucial feedback on the volunteer program, feel free. Okay. As I'm sure you guys have heard and seen, Lori and her crew have been working very hard to clean up the volunteer lounge. This was partially because of a curatorial effort to clean up the museum as a whole, but also the volunteer lounge needed some cleaning up. The volunteer nook of books is now in Brent's office. There's some shelves in there. So if there's something that you guys need for reading or training, that is now where you look.
So who is Brent and where's his office?
It's that door in the lounge. Like, you know, there's that door to the right when you walk in. That's Brent. Works at the front of the house.
Yeah.
The front desk.
It's the L portion of what our lounge was. Kind of like Maggie and Danny's office used to be on the right when you walk into our lounge area.
The furniture and lockers have been removed. If you prefer lockers, you can use the ones behind the front desk. That is what we've been told to say. And basically, Lori, if everyone wants some feedback on what are your thoughts on what should go in next? Are you looking for furniture? Things like that. Any suggestions is appreciated.
Charlie suggested a coat rack, which was a great idea. We have one in the library. We're gonna move in there and we can get more. Lynn wanted a better mirror because the other one's like 8 feet tall. But it's more about, my vision was like a mini airport lounge kind of thing, a place where you can go and talk to each other or read your notes prior to a tour. If you can talk for a while, you want to chill. And make it a space where if you want to eat lunch, you can eat lunch in there. Because there really isn't a lot of room in the break room, and I try to leave that for staff. So I mean, it's a thought, what else we could do in this area?
Lori, maybe a small table and 4 chairs would be the sort of place to eat lunch and also for us to sit around, not have a conversation.
Yeah,
There's not a lot of space.
there's room in there for a 36-inch square table and 4 chairs. And I have picked one out of Wayfair and given it to Mike. There's also, I was torn as you walk in on the left there, where do you put a table with stools? So you're facing the counter, which isn't very social, you're facing the wall. Or do we put in a bench where 3 people could sit on if they just were like, oh my God, I hate visitors. So, and that's a thought. The one issue that's still up in the air that I found tough one to answer is occasionally the mailboxes were used in there. I mean, there was a time when staff would write notes to us and they would leave them there. You could store things that you were going to use, like I want to read this before my tour and I always want to know it's here, so I grab it. So I'm not quite sure how we manage that. What suggestions y'all have? Do we just do Anna in front at the shop said what, do kind of like a thing where we could put folders if we want with our name on it.
I was suggesting something like that, like something where the folders could sit. And it's not like a big tall thing, but it's like a thing where you could, and then there's space for if you need to put something in there.
I like the table with 3 chairs too. I think that's.
There's also quite a bit like office supplies and things, like I know my file sorter I got from the graveyard of office supplies. So it's possible we could look at that and see if there's just anything super useful we could throw in there to, you know, have a sorting system and have it be low cost.
Does anybody use those boxes or slots as a true mail delivery system? Did you ever ask someone to leave something there for you?
No.
I mean, they had in there
You
since,
just text them.
right, and we are there, we do still have some folks who have flip phones. So I do wanna be respectful of that,
Yeah,
um,
I
But-
think a small filing system, like there's even those ones on the wall that you
no,
can
you can
get.
just leave a note, if someone wants to leave someone a note, there could be a bulletin board.
Yeah,
And they can-
the bulletin board could also be a good idea,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's a lot less space.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay,
That would be a lot more efficient, because then you could see your name.
correct, you're right.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the lounge?
Hopefully it'll get painted and the furniture will come and.
So just put like a volunteer book that
Mhm.
rents office, so he doesn't have any issues with us.
No.
Stepping into his office.
It's kind of just like let him know, if you don't know, he's a guy at the front desk, wears a hat, kind of curly hair, he's trying to grow a mullet. That's something he expressly told me, we've talked about it, I'm giving him good conditioner recommendations. But you just let him know, hey, I'm gonna take something from the book nook, can I go into your office? It's just like, you know, a courtesy, just to let him know, and he might even be in there, so just go ahead and knock and let him know.
He's in there like an hour or an hour and a half. Yeah,
Yeah.
once a day. He's usually at the front desk.
Mhm.
There are a lot of books in there now, a lot of stuff we took out of the library that we have 8 bazillion bloody copies of are on those shelves. And we have thought about just doing the simple sign out, just so we can track. But it's nice to be able to take a book on Rungus or on the collection and take it home.
Mhm.
Because what's in the library can't leave the library. So to me, there's some good, like 5 copies of the same Bob Coon book.
Mhm.
And it's a fun book to read. So I just think it's a great opportunity for continuing education
Mhm.
and, you know, Brett was fine.
Yeah, maybe if you have some time today, go check it out, see what's there, see what's available. Any other questions, comments? All right. Now, we have a lot of things coming up in the spring, so I'm gonna go over them basically in this list. If you have any specific questions about anything, let me know, or if you want further details, I can also email. But of course, as always, the libraries continue to be worked on with Lori and her crew, they're doing some amazing work. I was just in there yesterday. I was not sure what you're sorting the archive, right? You're reducing the archive, so you're doing some great work to make some space for some new things. Fables, Feathers, and Fur is of course continuing. It will take a break in April. There are also no shifts in March, primarily because there's the sponsors for Fables wanted to do some reading, so those shifts have been taken off FICNet. So they'll start back up again in May, and so good for you guys to know that like nothing is available in March, but after April, you'll be able to start doing Fables, Feathers, and Fur again. Docent tours, if you haven't emailed me and you want to become a docent, let me know. We just got, I know. We just got, basically the final draft of the docent manual. There's some small things that I have to like go around and change to like fix, because we have the Google Classroom now that we're gonna be using for docent training to make things a little bit more accessible and easy. But basically, we're on the cusp of starting a new docent class. So if you are a docent and you're interested in mentoring, please let me know. If you're interested in becoming a docent, please let me know. There'll be a lot of docent tours. The biggest pickup is gonna be in June, so start thinking about that. There's already a lot of tours for June. May is kind of halfway full, and then April is sporadic. There's only one open docent tour for March currently. It's at the end of the month. It's a private tour for some important people to Steve. So if you want to like get into the know of these, you sign up for both?
For the 28th, I think. it is.
Yeah, okay. So, so just keep that in mind. Monday musings, we're still going to continue to have these until the end of April. They'll be in the galleries, and then as I consulted with Lori, they will start again on the sculpture trail in April. We're gonna figure out a little bit what that system looks like, because people think that most of them have been covered, but yeah, you know, I'm new, I've never been on any of the Monday musings on the sculpture trail. I know I would appreciate them, so maybe we'll figure some more details out.
We're gonna have elephants out there.
The elephants are gonna be out, we're gonna talk about that bad boy. The evaluation project, as I've touched on earlier, is gonna be a big spring opportunity. There'll be a lot of shifts available for that. So please keep an eye on that as I start to build that schedule out. Spring Break Open Studio is on VicNet currently. That's working with Patrice. There's 3 days out of the week, the last week of March, and then the first week of April, only for 1 hour. You're kind of just doing crafts with the kids. So if you're interested, definitely sign up. Those are first come, first serve. The big thing that's gonna be coming up more recently is the Great Elephant Migration. As you guys heard, the elephants are coming. And they're asking for a lot of help from our volunteers. Now that I've already told them that it's gonna be on a, if we can fill it basis, basically, you know, we will fill as many as possible, but if someone doesn't come, we will let them know. But the schedule is typically about, I think what we've gotten to is 2-ish hours on days that Aubrey is the operational manager for the Great Elephant Migration. We've been talking a lot. She will be here in person to make sure that everything in the elephants goes well. She will be doing a training for the elephants, which I'm going to announce soon once we nail down the date. It'll be close to when elephants get here. But basically there'll be 2 days out of the week that she is required per her contract to not work. And that will be up to volunteers to cover those shifts for her. Basically, there are these educational conversation talks. You'll basically be using the information you know about the elephants to talk to people about conservation, the elephants, art. What does it mean to balance, you know, that kind of thing. Basically anything you would do to talk to a guest. And she will be doing the training on it, so she will be well prepared. So there will be 3 shifts on those days. Those will be a bit longer. They'll be about 2.5 hours. But those are weather dependent. If it's raining outside, we will not make you go do a talk outside.
Well, those gonna be on there.
Yeah, we haven't not put out the schedule yet because we keep fine tuning to make sure that originally the shifts were really long. We had 2 shifts for the 2-day shifts. They were like 4 hours each. We're like, oh, that's a bit too long. So now we're doing 2.5. So it's kind of like we're maintaining the schedule to be as fair to you guys. So you're not standing out there that long. Yes.
Don't the elephant people who organize this, don't they bring people to talk about it? Aren't there, isn't that part of the deal?
It's a little bit different since they usually, what they have told me is that usually they're hosting it in a public area. So it's a little bit different. They have to have people to watch the elephants the whole time. The main purpose of our volunteers being there is to like be kind of a representative of the museum and like a knowledgeable person of both the museum and the elephants. So people, they don't have speakers per se. They have their operational manager who's going to be doing these talks. It's a different format than the other places that they've hosted since we're an institution. And they're sharing the grounds of an institution. It's a lot more about connecting the 2 places. Does that make sense? I know, sometimes it's hard to explain. Any other questions about the elephant migration? Yeah, we have a meeting tomorrow where we're gonna like nail down the date for the training and finalize the schedule. So I'm gonna get these out to you as soon as I have them.
Sage, so if we sign up for a shift, does that mean we are giving an address like a docent tour?
It'll depend on which shift you sign up for. So Mondays and Tuesdays will be the days she's not there. That's when it'll be a lot more like a docent tour. Any other day, you're kind of just there to help her out and like, you know, kind of be like extra hands for when she's there. So it's a lot less like demanding of you, it's a lot more casual. So if that's something you're interested in, there'll be 5 days of the week when you can do those more casual elephant shifts. If you want a more docent-led experience, the Monday and Tuesday shifts will do that. And it's not just for docents, I talked to her about that, she's welcome for volunteers who have trained and feel comfortable leading conversations to handle those Monday, Tuesday shifts as well. Any other questions about Garlic Migration?
Who's this lady? She works for the.
Aubrey, yeah, she works for the migration, yes.
Oh, she
She'll be
works for the
here,
elephant.
yeah, she'll be here about
Okay.
2 months, while the elephants are here, helping run everything. We're just in time, we're almost to you. As a reminder,
Quick question.
Yeah.
Should people start getting food ready now, or?
it's not 50, it's 40. I think we're good. Or if you wanna do it, oh yeah, go ahead, there'll be time.
Cause then then I'm coming back to talk.
Yes.
I'll do that. Sorry.
You're fine, no, you're good, I know what Jay's talking about. As a reminder, Plein Air Fest is coming up in June 7th, yeah,
14th.
I have the date later in the
It is
slide, so
June
don't worry.
14th.
Thank you. Gabrielle's giving me the
The
thumbs up.
training's happening that week, the Thursday, then we're canvas stamping on Friday.
Thank you. But those volunteer shifts will be getting to me soon as Gabrielle and Stephanie know what their needs are. So keep that in mind, June is coming up. This is a request from our events team. The Jackson Hole High School's prom will be hosted here on May 10th. They're looking for volunteers to help out with that. 2 to 3, yeah. It's fun. If you guys are interested, let me know. Those shifts are already on VicNet, so you're welcome to sign up if you're interested. If you have any questions, Jessica's here to answer them about that event, if anyone has any real quick.
That can be bouncers.
Is it kind of like what Georgia did and sat by the thing and said, don't. So,
Yes, exactly. So just a little background, the Jackson Hole High School prom is open to all Teton County District, school district seniors. So if you're homeschooled or at TSS or whatever. Last year we had 445 kids show up with just me. It was insanity. Luckily all the galleries are closed. But there is just glitter and feathers that we were picking up glitter for weeks. They have a very strict wardrobe. What's that called? Regulations this year. Absolutely no glitter, no feathers. I'll personally be at the door saying, no, you cannot come in. That was the high school's idea, because we almost didn't let them come back. But there was also some kids sneaking some alcohol in the restaurant. So essentially, so Gabrielle and I will both be there. We will have 2 to 3 security employees here, but then I would love to just have 2 or 3 extra hands to cut extra eyes. It is later in the evening. It takes place from 8 to 11 p.m. I do apologize about that, but that is just time. Teenagers are away on Saturday for lunch. Do they eat before they come here? Yes, there's no food. The culinary team makes cupcakes and then there's water. And
Additionally, the VicNet shift, because of the way VicNet works, we gotta love VicNet, won't let me post the shift till 11. It only lets me do it till 10. So it says 8 to 10, but my emails I was going to say.
An hour potentially, maybe 2 hours is
Yeah.
fine. We can decide that on the spot.
I was just gonna in my announcements, I will say it is from 8 to 11, but the shift can only be till 10 because VicNet hates my guts. It really does.
Oh, yeah, so it's crazy times, but it's super fun and the kids look great and they're just so appreciative to be here, so, it's a special opportunity for sure.
Yeah.
I think the more eyes they have on them, maybe the less likely they are to
Yeah.
have misbehaving ideas. Yeah.
All right, any questions about the rest of these volunteer opportunities? Of course, if anything else comes up, I will let you all know. Weekly announcements as always, perfect timing.
Whoa.
Well, Lindy gave away most of our updates, but
A few others.
there's a few others. We are we're starting into our new year in May, right? The staff are going through their evaluations right now. And something that we do every year, we do our annual evaluation. Our department heads do those for each of the staff members. It's an interactive process and we're using a new system this year. It's more electronic through our payroll system that we're doing. So this is always a great time to give feedback and to get feedback from our staff members. And we also, last year, we implemented a 360-degree review where all the department heads were reviewed. And usually by 3 or 4 people, sometimes one person in their department and then outside the department, so that we figure out are they working collaboratively and things like that. I had 10 that participated in my 360, and then I get my review from the Board of Trustees through Wendy and through Avi. We just approved our budget for the new year in our last meeting, our February board meeting, and we're working on a strategic plan. So our strategic plan is usually a 3-year rolling average, and we're about 18 months into the one that we have, and we're going to update and we're going to change our cycle a little bit. We've got 6 key strategic objectives, and they're prioritized. And when we finalize some of the details behind them, we'll share those with you so you know where the museum's headed. The strategic plan is super important. It's always our North Star. When we get programs, events, exhibitions, and things like that, we always say, is it in our strategic plan? Will it enhance or help us to accomplish the strategic objectives that we have? Along with that, we've also incorporated into our programs team, which I don't know if many of you know about programs team. This is where exhibitions, programs, and events, educational programs, they all get vetted through what's called the programs team. We've established probably, I think there's at least 20 different criteria on there in order for us to be able to say, yes, we had a great presentation this morning on 2 new programs, and we'll be evaluating that with these criteria, and the criteria are like, does it meet our vision? Is it our mission? How will it elevate the museum? What will we collaborate with other institutions? These are the kinds of things that we'll go through. And now we won't check the list off on every single item because not everyone will meet those, but we'll evaluate it. It gives us something to say yes or no to, right? Instead of just that, oh, it feels good. Yes, right? So we're really trying to structure that. Our next board meeting will be in June. It'll be June 20th, I believe. And so we're looking forward to that. Again, the board meets 4 times a year. And Lindy alluded to our offsite board retreat. This year it will be in Jackson. So a lot of the staff members will be a part of that. Again, it's a 2-day event where the first day we have our normal board meetings, and the second day is more strategic, or it could be about strategic plan. It could be like she mentioned about what she shared with you earlier. Our last one was a lot of conversation with the firm that we retained to help us with the C word that we're not saying, right? But and also about the architectural firm. So more to come on that. There's a ton of stuff going on right now with the staff, and they're doing a great job. And the question was asked, what can we do to help? Earlier during Lindy's presentation, and I would just say this, one of the emphasis that we're going to have is on membership, right? We hired, it's Heidi Larson David, not Heidi David Larson, it's Heidi Larson David to be our new director of development. She'll be moving here full time in either June or July. She's transitioning from Colorado. And her husband's here most of the time now, being the golf pro at the Pines. But we really need to strengthen our relationship with our members, and that's feedback. It's also bringing new people in as members, right? And continuing to build that support. The things that we're going to do in the near future, in my mind, are historic for this museum. They are historic. Something that we've never done on this level before. And I'm not saying that to brag. What I'm telling you is our goal is what we say with AAM. We want to be better today than we were tomorrow. or yesterday. We're better today than we were yesterday, and tomorrow we even want to be better. It's always doing something to elevate the museum in any form or fashion. We trip and fall all the time. We learn. We just had a great event that Stephanie put on for us down in Palm Springs about cultivating and helping provide exposure to people who have a presence in Jackson, but they're also in Palm Springs. She did a wonderful job. These are the kinds of things we're gonna do. Right? I would open up, see, do you have questions of me?
Where do ideas for new projects and events come from?
It's a great question. So our programs team, any staff member can attend, right? Any staff member can present an idea for a program, an event, or even an exhibition to this team. From there, what happens a lot of times is like, oh, we need more information, or we'd like this clarified. All of the department heads are a part of that, right? And I'd say about half of our staff come to those meetings from various departments. They get approved there, and then it goes to department heads to have a deeper discussion and to also get approved from the department heads so that we're all collaborating. Everybody has a presence at the table and can say yes or no to this. In the case of exhibitions, it goes one step further. And that is, once it goes through that process, it gets approved by the collections committee. So our annual cycle or our annual exhibition schedule is approved at the final level at the collections committee. Good question.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right.
Come on by.
All right, you bet. But I figured the right time.
Yes. And take this place. Programs and events, I can talk or you, I can do. I can do it. I just, since you're in the face. Okay, you were just in the room and I was like, yeah, she's here, and that's why I came. I prepared, so I'll try to either way.
Okay, let's see. So, since the next quarterly volunteer meeting is the week of Plein Air Fest, I just wanted to get these all on your radar. May 30th, we will have our summer opening exhibit event that we host every spring and fall. So this one we focused on the elephants exhibit, and it'll be the blessing of the elephants is kind of the title. 5 to 7 like usual. I will need some volunteer assistance in clicking and greeting, handing out tokens or tickets for food, and just helping man the galleries as well. As usual, we generally tend to have anywhere between 200 to 400 people. So it's a whole family affair. So we expect this one to be a big hit. So all the galleries will be open, but we'll be mostly focusing on the blessing of the elephants. More details to come, but just want to get that on your radar. June 14th, our annual Plein Air Fest, one of my favorite events. Very staff heavy, very volunteer heavy. We will have shifts out hopefully at the end of May. I'm really hoping to get those out in May. It's the same shifts as before, where we'll need clickers and greeters for the parking lot, coordinating on both parking lots. We'll need volunteers for art handling. Lori Bay, you're the great expert on that one. I hope you're there. The artist check-in, as well as I think staff will probably be running the checkout process again, but any and all hands are greatly helpful, and it'll be outside, weather permitting. And if we know what to do in case there's wind, so that's great. Yeah, Lori,
Any thought on the auction portion of it, increasing the time or staggering tables?
we are hoping to stagger the tables a little bit better outside this year,
And
but
time wise,
time wise,
because
haven't heard that feedback before.
Only because I feel like somebody writes their name.
Yeah.
And they didn't get it, they wanna go to
Mhm.
that next one, but you can't, like, I'll send Ellen, you go check and see if I got that.
Yeah,
I feel like it could help, I don't know, maximize our work.
well, the whole point to do it in that small period of time is to generate that energy, so we want people to stick around. And we want them to outbid each other, so if they have like a piece that they're competing against with someone else. We want them to be present and active in that, in that small time frame. We don't wanna lose people to like walk off and, I mean, we have their phone number and their email, we can contact them if they're eating lunch, but is that what you're saying?
No,
Oh,
I'll try, I'll talk about it a little later, only. It's like a deck of cards, okay, for.
It's staggering, with tables 1 through 5 we sell this time, tables 5 through 8 we sell this time.
That's
We tried that approach before,
oh, I don't know.
We've been around a long time.
yeah.
And how did that work?
I'm trying to remember, I think what happened was there was some loss of excitement. And maybe it's because there was too much time in between, but they changed it to this format here for the very reason.
I remember asking Michelle, and she said, people wanted 45 minutes, okay? But because you have those people, and I know who those folks are, they want that piece, but they want another one, and they're prepared to spend a couple grand.
Yeah.
They didn't get to spend it, and they don't know they didn't get to spend it.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is it might be a better way to capitalize on people's wallets.
The timing is set, just so you know, the time frame. Anything in between and the basic gist from last year is already out,
Yeah.
so we can talk about it. I don't know how the artists will feel about that. That's the only thing. Just because it's stressful enough as it is. But we can, let's
It's
talk.
an opportunity to get a name on the sheet.
Yeah,
That might not.
I get
be
it.
there. There's nothing worse than the artist standing there watching an empty sheet.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I mean, it's just a thought.
We can talk about it. If anything might have to happen next year.
It's
Just
your-
because
it's your
I already
part.
sent everything out, so, and the artists are all agreed to the same format, so, but we can see how we can figure that out, maybe. Yeah, I'm open to it. Let's see. Cool, food provided by Pallet again, pay on own, for that, outside of the restaurant will be open. As well, and let's see, I think that's about it for that one, and then yoga on the trail. This is just an opportunity to hang out, and do some yoga on the trail, just always want to put that out there. That's another program we do throughout the summer, July and August, every Thursday from 9 to 10 on the South Trail. So yeah, any other questions? Oh, and thank you for all that you do.
I have pictures for you, Lori, if you want that. I've been saving the numbers. From Blacktail.
Oh,
That's you, Nate.
Just that
If there's 3 photos of you on the iDrive.
Yeah.
Cool, any questions? Steve and Jane, thanks for being online.
Okay, for our last thing before lunch, I know I'm keeping you all tantalizing as we can all smell the food. Jane is gonna give us updates on the spring summer exhibitions in Wapiti. I know last quarterly we got exhibition updates from Tammy, but then those didn't cover the ones in the Wapiti Gallery. So Jane's gonna cover that.
So some of these things are new, and some of these things are old friends that we do in the Wapiti Gallery. The first one, the one that we're hanging right now this week with teachers, is the state-of-the-art student art show in honor of Marion Buckenroth. It runs from March 19th through May 4th, and there's an opening celebration on March 19th, which is Wednesday of next week. I think. Yeah, from 4 to 6. So that's when the kids are invited, the art teachers, all the parents. It's open to the public, so of course you're all invited as well. But this is the exhibit where we typically get hundreds of works of art from kids, everything from sculptural pieces to paintings to, you know, you name it, collages. Some of them are individual works by individual kids. Some of them are group projects that they've done with a whole group of kids in their class. But like I said, we're hanging that this week and that will be, it's always really popular, right? And so you are encouraged to bring, if you have people here leading a tour, to bring them to see the kids' artwork. And then the kids and their family, immediate families, get free admission while their work is up in the Wapiti Gallery. So they just have to come to the front desk and say, I'm a student artist, and then they get to go in there, get to tour it for free. The next one after that one is our summer/fall exhibit. The title this year is A Conceptual Thread. Patrice has been really working hard to put this together. The dates are May 30th through October 25th. And it will be a combination of work by really well-known fiber artists, texture art, or what's the right word? Fiber art, there's another word that's textile, thank you.
Yeah.
Textile art or fiber art, thank you, Lori. And so a few of these images here, I tried to put the names of the artists underneath. These are well-known artists. Then there will be a wall, which is more local, regional. There has been a call for art out there, and I think Patrice is still trying to narrow that down and decide which pieces for sure in that category will go on display. Some of you may remember Doris Florig, who's been here before. She will be having one piece of her own, a tapestry, in this exhibit. She's a local textile artist. She also will be doing a relatively short, week-long residency where she's going to be in the Wapiti Gallery, and she's going to be working on one of her own tapestries and talking to people about, you know, dyeing your own wool. And because that's all she doesn't work with any commercial wools that I know of. She always dyes her own. She'll be talking about the process of creating a tapestry. Another element in this space will be an interactive. There are going to be 3 looms, big looms, along that wall where the projector screen comes down, and people can, anyone, any age, kids, adults, can sit down and play with, you know, the over under to create a tapestry. We envision that people won't sit there and finish a tapestry, but they will sit down and maybe work for 15 minutes or something, and then move on. And then the next person comes in and adds to it. Some of you may have noticed Patrice had a hanging loom that she created in the classroom last week, just to test out this idea. And we decided, I think originally we were thinking, let's make it big, cover the whole wall. Well, you just can't get the tension you need if it gets too big. So now we're thinking 3 different looms, which is nice in another way too, because 3 people could be working simultaneously. Any questions about that?
Shane, do you know the week that Doris is gonna be in
I
residence?
do, but not off the top of my head.
I'll
It's
get
gonna
it to you
be
guys as soon.
early July. It's gonna be in early July.
Early July, okay, and the other thing is, since it's gonna be here all summer, are you doing a training for volunteers?
We will.
Mhm.
Yes, good question. We will definitely do that. Because we want volunteers to know, you know, what to say if you bring people in,
Right.
but also if you just happen to have some time and you want to be in there helping with the interactive weaving, you can kind of help them and know what's going on. So, okay, we can go to the next one. And then this is a brand new thing that we are going to do in the, well, look at the dates on the bottom, November 7th through January 3rd. So it's like fall, like later fall into early winter. And the reason we've decided to add another exhibit to the Wapiti Gallery is because some of you may recall that student curated exhibit used to happen in November. Now they don't want to get started until January. They say it's too hard for their students that close to the beginning of the school year to get it together for student curated exhibit. So we didn't want the Wapiti Gallery to stand empty. I mean, value added for people here if all of our spaces are open. So to fill that gap, Patrice has come up with a video exhibition. Tiffany Dieter is the video artist. She's from New York. And there are 3 short films of hers. One of them is this called Kansas Ice Storm down there. But there are 3 short videos, maybe 9 minutes roughly each. And they will be showing on a loop in there. The room will be set up like a viewing area with these folding chairs set up in rows so people can come in and sit. There will also be an interactive piece for visitors to kind of share their opinion about a certain piece that is a more challenging piece about a cockroach. So they can share their thoughts about that and see what other people think about it. And then the artist, Tiffany Dieter, will be coming in, what did we decide this morning?
December 4th.
We said, Jinx,
December.
What is it?
December 4th.
December. Okay, I thought you said September. December 4th, that makes sense. Is when Tiffany Dieter will be here and she'll be showing the films and having a question and answer. And I'm sure people will have lots of questions. I've watched the films and they are not easy films. They take some interpretation. They're interesting. Some of them are easier than others. And I think it's really great to challenge our visitors like that and to have the artist here herself to answer questions. Any questions about that? Okay.
With that's the last part of the meeting part. We can finally go all eat lunch.
Oh, and we'll do a training on this too, because it needs it. This will need it.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you to everyone who came and talked. Bye, Steve.
And congratulations to Jane.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
See ya. All right. I want to talk to you later if I can, Sage. A couple things.
Governor's Arts Award available.
I think
Have
that's
you guys
really
seen
fun.
that?
I shared.
You haven't had a chance
it.
to see it. She did a great job.
She's the best one.
Yeah, she was.